now we will look at some of the feminine archetypal elements in video games. And in my mind, no other game seems to embody so many classical elements of the feminine than the Castlevania series, especially the later games. Remember, we're not talking strictly about men versus women here. What I'm trying to point out is that, with Solar of Astor, there's a nuanced presence of both masculine and feminine energies that are embodied in each of these characters. With Alucard here, he also there's a nuanced balance between masculine and feminine happening. So I'm going to show that as we move on through this series. And by the way, where you can find, and I should just backtrack, where you can find this playful balance of masculine and feminine in a person, you can find harmony, right? If you're comfortable if I have a core masculine energy and I can come into my feminine, not always, but when I can, when I do, I can come into my feminine in certain ways and be comfortable with that. There's a certain harmony there. It feels really good, right? So when people are in harmony with themselves, there's this energy dynamic that people may not put it to words, but there's an energy dynamic happening, and a good part of that is a balancing, right? Because people that they're skewed to one side or the other. They're either, super masculine or super feminine, and they don't come into the other energy very often, or they don't appreciate the other side of that energy from others. That's it can be pretty painful, actually, because the harmony, the flow of the energy, the exchange, right, is not really happening. So everything's just kind of just stuck in one gear, right? And so the pinnacle of the Castlevania series, at least in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree, is the 1997 PlayStation Game of the Year and winner of countless awards, Symphony of the Night. There are many reasons why Symphony of the Night fulfills so perfectly the archetypal symbolism that's associated with the divine feminine energy. It has the masculine also, but it just screams, this is like an homage to the divine feminine. If Dark Souls it's really a guy's game, right? It's a masculine game. Dark Souls is a homage to the masculine with holding a candle in the darkness to the feminine. It's got a little bit of the feminine in there. And so Castlevania is the mirror image of that. Or not so much the mirror image, but it's the feminine to Dark Souls masculine. One thing that makes Castlevania so loved by fans are the great soundtracks which accompany each game in the series. Entire symphonic orchestras have dedicated evenings to playing scores from the Castlevania games. So it shouldn't be any surprise at all that the term music is, of course, a feminine noun in the Latin based languages, and it actually means pertaining to the muses. And when we trace back even further this origin of the word muse, we trace it back to Greek, then we can find out that the muses are the 9 goddesses or daughters of Zeus in Greek mythology. They are known as the protectors of the arts. This 17th century painting depicts the muses Clio, Euterpe, and Thalia. And Euterpe being the muse primarily associated with music. although she isn't the only one associated with music in the strictest sense. The Greek-derived term musa, or musa, M-O-U-S-A, can be traced back even further to its Proto-Indo-European roots, which means inspiring goddess of a particular poet. And in much of the world, music has traditionally been associated with the feminine energy. And this shouldn't somehow be interpreted as music only being for women, of course. However, music relates closely to dance, rhythm, and harmony, which are all traits closely associated with the feminine. This image depicts the Hindu goddess Saraswati. She is the deity of music, art, and wisdom. She is closely associated with a river in India, which bears her namesake. Music has been universally associated with the feminine throughout the ages. This is nothing new. Those who have explored their music as deeply as they could invariably come into contact with their feminine energy. Now, you can stop wondering why so many male musicians have long hair. Music is derived from the harmony of the natural world. Nature and harmony, again, are feminine attributes. This isn't to say that music is only for women or the feminine, but rather a man must come into close contact with his feminine energy if he is to transcend mere technical mastery. So what I mean by that is the masculine is the, let's say, the analytical side. Let's say when we're talking about learning music, that if you learn it from the masculine perspective, it's going to be technical. It's going to be analytical. If you learn music from the feminine side, it's going to be intuitive, right? It's going to be, it won't be as technical. It's going to be soulful, right? It's going to have style. It's going to have more style. It's going to have, so you can be a technical master of a guitar, but maybe you haven't developed your own style, right? So that's the feminine is like developing your own style, and the masculine of guitar playing is learning the technical. Okay, I can play all the chords, I can play all the scales, I can do everything technically, but you don't have your own, you haven't really gone in and explored the feminine yet. So you need, again, we're looking at this paradox again. They're both needed. So there's far more to music than what the masculine can bring by itself, of course. In fact, look at these guys. I mean, these are all you got Bowie, Prince, Michael Jackson, Jimi Hendrix. Some of the greatest musicians, male musicians ever on the planet in the history of music, right? And you can see that they're all comfortable and they're feminine. They're so completely exploring. I mean, if you really look at them, they're exploring their music and they're comfortable in that. And I mean, look, it's pretty clear. This is harmony, right? This is where the masculine meets the feminine, right? These guys are all genius musicians, and they embrace this femininity. They're not trying to be women, right? That's a totally different thing altogether. It doesn't mean they're trying to be women. They're just exploring the muse, right? They're exploring their feminine, and this is where it's taking them, and they're comfortable with it because they're at the top. All of these men reached the top of their musical. They've reached the pinnacle of their music in a way, right? So they've explored it fully, and have come back, and now they are now they look like this, right? They're freaking everyone out who's stuck in their masculine, right? Another obvious element of the feminine when it comes to Castlevania is the imagery of the moon and the night sky. Even more so than the sun, the moon is automatically likened to the feminine for a lot of people. If it is the masculine energy which is upward and outward, it is the feminine energy which occupies the mysterious underworld of the night. The moon is under the light of the sun, and it reflects this energy to the earth at night. So even then, a little of the masculine can always be found in the feminine. And this makes me wonder if vampires cannot live in the sunlight, but they seem to be okay in the moonlight, but the moonlight is reflective sunlight, never mind. Conversely, a little bit of the feminine can be found in the masculine if we look closely enough. Where we run into trouble with this whole concept is believing both of these forces somehow contradict or somehow cancel each other out. However, such contradiction or opposition merely represents a misunderstanding of the fundamental nature of masculine and feminine and how these forces work together in the universe. And by the way, I found this image fairly recently. I thought it was just incredible. This is from the art of, sorry Daniel if I mess up your last name, the art of Daniel Boni. So check out his site. Really awesome art there. So it is not merely an aesthetic choice which softens the masculine heart. It's not like you put on, you start dressing like Bowie from Ziggy Stardust and you just become feminine, right? That's not what allows for the wisdom of the feminine to pervade. Rather, it is the masculine opening itself, opening to exploration into the fundamentally feminine domains of music, harmony, and sensuality, which seems the best way to account for the feminine aesthetic found in Symphony of the Night. This wasn't always the case with Castlevania, of course. The art from the first game looks like Conan the Barbarian or something. So it has evolved, and the masculine has seemed to have progressed in its exploration of the feminine by the time the first Castlevania reaches Symphony of the Night. And of course, the Castlevania series reached its absolute pinnacle with Symphony of the Night, exempling the harmony of the masculine's embrace of this feminine aspect. Which brings us to a rather interesting relationship between the iconography of the two games which have been the focus of this video series so far, Dark Souls and Castlevania. Both of these images contain some very interesting balance and harmony happening between. There's this interplay happening in these images, which I'll explain. This interplay happening between masculine and feminine. First, notice the position of the swords in either panel. Alucard is holding his sword upright toward the moon, which symbolizes the masculine veneration of the feminine. The image on the left from Dark Souls tells a different story. The downward sword and bending of the knee is a submissive or feminine gesture, whereas the downward sword in the fire alludes to death and resurrection, demonstrating harmony of masculine and feminine, as well as the eternal cycle of these forces. Because if you have a sword that's coming down, it's essentially not an effective weapon anymore. It's been submitted. It's turned into something else. But then it's in the fire and the flame, right? The fire is, and of course you have to account for the fact that the bonfire in Dark Souls is a place of resurrection. It's a place where you redeem souls, right? So there's this very interesting interplay happening between masculine and feminine. Now, sun and fire represent a constant, okay, in this bonfire here. Sun and fire are a predictable pattern. Either the sun is shining or it's not, right? The sun's always on, of course. The moon, however, is constantly shifting through many phases or modes. It's where we get the word mood from, reminding us of the natural cycle and seasons of life. The moon goes through its modes or movements similar to an orchestral piece of music. So it's another relation to the feminine. Some women talk about how predictable men are, and some men talk about how unpredictable women seem to be. But both of these tendencies can be appreciated as masculine and feminine energy aspects when we contemplate some of these archetypal objects of nature. It is when we venture out to explore the opposite energy aspect within ourselves that some rather incredible growth and insights can come to us. It's also something that allows us to return to our core energy as men and women with a renewed appreciation and understanding of ourselves. The sun and moon together embody the paradoxical nature of our reality. Two seemingly opposite planetary bodies as seen from Earth, one owning the night, the other owning the day. In humankind's quest for meaning and our search for answers, the sun and moon have always been focal points for great contemplation. Understanding and accepting of what is, in the sense of the universal energies of masculine and feminine, and how they relate to men and women in our practical lives, can lead us to a greater awareness and appreciation for each other. This awareness can help us identify imbalances of these energies within ourselves as well as others.